Welcome to a special edition of Meet the Leaders. I'm Dara Wells, and we are coming to you from Charleston, West Virginia, and the State Capitol building. We are thrilled to have with us Delegate Paul Espinosa, who has just been appointed House Majority Whip. Congratulations.
Thank you very much, Dara. Good to be with you today.
Nice to have you. So, Paul, tell us, what does the whip do?
Well, the whip primarily is responsible for helping ensure that we have a good line of communications between all of our members. Contrary to popular belief, it's not as if our agenda just materializes. It's pushed down from the leadership. It's very much a member-driven process, and we very much want to know what's important to our members, what's important to their constituents, and then we craft our agenda around what the majority of our members want. So we've been very much engaged these last few days, and it'll certainly continue for the coming weeks leading up to the January session, of just really trying to ascertain what are the specific pieces of legislation that we want to become the cornerstone of our legislative agenda for the coming session.
So what have you been hearing from your members?
Well, education is certainly a very frequently mentioned topic. As a former chair of the House Education Committee, that's certainly a topic that's important to me. While we certainly have been able to address during the last session teacher pay and our school service personnel and other state employee pay, and the governor has already proposed another 5% aggregate pay raise for the coming year, I think there's certainly an interest in trying to understand how we ensure we're getting the return on investment that our students deserve. And while if you look at the per capita investment in students that we currently have and will continue to increase with that additional pay raise, just want to make sure that our students are seeing the positive results of that investment.
Right. There was a survey that was just recently released. It showed that West Virginia was 48th out of 50 states for teacher pay. Now, I'm from New York. We were like number one,
right.
But again, cost of living is higher.
Sure.
Still, that's quite a discrepancy. So how did West Virginia get to that point? And do you see a way out? Do you see the light at the end of the tunnel?
Well, sadly, you're exactly right. We have seen the rank of teacher pay decline significantly over the last few decades, and our leadership is certainly committed to trying to reverse that. And again, we very pleased to enact the largest aggregate pay raise in our state's history last year. And as I mentioned, the governor's already proposed, and I believe there will be strong bipartisan support for enacting another 5% aggregate pay raise this coming session. Certainly one of the things that's, I think, of concern to me, in particular in a growth county area over in the Eastern Panhandle, is how we not only provide competitive pay across the state, but how do we compete with surrounding states?
Yes, indeed.
You look at some of our school districts in the Eastern Panhandle, for example. I mean, they're hiring 200 new teachers a year, and very quickly losing them to our neighboring counties in Maryland and Virginia. So I think that's something that I know has been mentioned by members of our caucus, particularly some of our new incoming members, is how do we address those differences in cost of living, and perhaps try to finally provide some type of either retention pay or locality pay to try to address some of those challenges that our border counties do face.
Sure, and no one wants another strike. I mean, such an ugly episode, a tough time for everybody involved, I'm sure, so you don't want to repeat. No,
absolutely not, because really our students are the ones who end up shortchanged by that. And but again, I do think that we took ultimately very serious action. Again, the largest pay raise in state history. And again, I think there's broad bipartisan support for trying to do more this year. And in addition, the governor's proposed additional funding for our public employees insurance program to the tune of about $100 million additional funding to further stabilize that, to help avoid significant premium increases that they've seen in the past. So I think there is just broad agreement that we need to do all that we can to not only attract teachers, but to retain quality teachers.
And keep them here, sure. I've heard you say it now 3 times, bipartisanship. And boy, it is sorely lacking in so many governments, including the federal government. Is the West Virginia government an example, you think, of bipartisan cooperation?
I believe so. If you look at the vast majority of legislation that's enacted each year, it typically passes with 90 or 95 votes out of 100 in the House.
Wow,
And,
that's high.
And, in the high 30s in our 34-member Senate. So,
Yeah.
there are certainly, a few contentious issues each session. And, certainly I suspect that we don't know exactly what they'll be yet, but I'm sure there'll be some that'll be a little bit more decided on a partisan vote. But for the most part, I think we do work well across the, with our colleagues across the aisle. As Majority Whip, for many measures, it's imperative that we have support across the aisle. One of the issues that's been a topic of great deal of discussion is how we address one of the major impediments to job creation, and that's the tax on business equipment and inventory.
Right.
West Virginia is really an outlier there. We're one of only
One of
a
9,
handful
I
of
think.
states,
Yeah.
that taxes business equipment and inventory. And in order to address that, that's going to require a constitutional amendment, and that requires a 2/3 vote in both the House and the Senate. And certainly that will require votes from the other side of the aisle on both the House and the Senate in order to be able to move forward a proposal. So certainly would be my goal to look for all opportunities where we can agree on good common sense policies that will continue to move West Virginia forward and continue this economic turnaround that we're currently experiencing.
Where does infrastructure fit into the picture?
Well, I think it's extremely important. If you look at our roads and transportation system, very pleased that we were able to pass the bond that will allow us to just make significant strides in improving our road infrastructure. Certainly broadband's a topic that's of frequent discussion in the legislature, and we have enacted some good measures, I believe, to try to address particularly some of the hard-to-reach areas. As someone who's been previously involved in telecommunications,
Cable guy, I think.
absolutely.
Yeah, right.
And also
not that old, by the way.
and also, telephony as well.
Right.
Certainly recognize that it's a challenge. In some of the very rural pockets of West Virginia, it's very, very challenging to reach those areas. But we did pass legislation that allows for the establishment of co-ops where it makes sense, so that if there are communities that want to kind of roll up their sleeves and try to think outside the box and address some of those needs, there's an opportunity to do that. And I anticipate there'll be further legislation this session. So that infrastructure, those needs certainly will be, I think, in the forefront of our deliberations this session. Deferred maintenance. I mean, unfortunately, if you look at a lot of our state facilities around the state, there has been a significant amount of deferred maintenance when we were really having very difficult budget challenges. Difficult to address all those things you want. So I'm certainly a firm believer that now that we are looking at a substantial revenue surpluses, that we invest that money wisely, that we don't just go on a spending spree.
Right, and say, whoa, we got money, so let's just
address
spend.
those things that we truly need to address. We've talked about the need to take care of our state employees who are, I'd say from a competitive standpoint, below where we need them to be, compared to our surrounding states, but also looking at our state infrastructure and those things that we really need to take care of if they're going to serve West Virginia going forward.
Well, it sounds like you have a lot on your plate, but we have confidence. So good luck in the coming year, and thank you, Delegate Espinosa, for being with us.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you being here today.
Glad to be here. And that does it for this portion of Meet the Leaders. I'm Dara Wells, coming to you from the State House in West Virginia, and we'll see you soon.